Morning, everybody. So sometimes people ask me, as the regional chairman, what do your powers include? Actually, very little, but one thing I do have power over is chairs. So I want you to come one row closer. So please pick up your chair and come closer. I feel very far from you. That feels better, to me, anyway. It's really good to see everybody here again. Despite Mitty's rather ornate introduction, the fact is that Fumiko and I lived here at Lancaster Gate for a while. Two of our children were conceived here. This was our place of faith for many, many years. And although we've been away for a long, long time, it always feels like home to come back. So thank you for that. You know, before I give my sermon, which is not long, you'll be pleased to know, I've been thinking a lot about True Father this week, and of course it's just 6 days away now from the anniversary of True Father's Seonghwa, which was, by the solar calendar, September the 3rd, 2012. If you cast your mind back, and I'm sure many of you have been doing this, I remember very clearly the moment when I heard the news that True Father was grievously ill. It was August the 13th. And we just had that earlier, it was a Sunday, and earlier that day, we'd had an enormous Sunday service up at the Unification Theological Seminary in New York, when all of the New York region had gathered together, and many young people, actually probably we had 1,000 or 2,000 people there. It was a beautiful day. Everybody was in a great mood. The band, I remember, was particularly good that day, thanks to our band here for today as well. And I remember driving back from that afternoon and thinking, well, that's pretty good. I have a feeling this is going to be a very good year. That time I was working with the Universal Peace Federation. And then early on Monday morning, about 1 a.m., a close friend of mine called me in the middle of the night, of course, and you never really want to get a phone call at 1 a.m., right? It's very rare that people call you at 1 a.m. to give you good news. And he said, look, I thought you ought to know, True Father's just been admitted into hospital, and it looks bad. This was still some weeks before Father passed, and I could almost not wait until the morning. I didn't want to wake anyone else up, but I wondered, well, what's really happening? And perhaps you remember that all around the world, over the next 2 or 3 weeks, we prayed, we fasted, we did whatever devotions we could imagine and think of. I remember we gathered at the Holy Ground at Belvedere for day after day, which we normally didn't do, to tell you the truth. Although we have the Holy Ground there, it isn't overused, but at that time it really was, and we gathered and we prayed for Father's recovery. And in the beginning, I think most of us could not believe that our prayers would not be answered, or that Father would not make once again a spectacular recovery, because we were kind of used to Father cheating death. Just a few years had passed since the helicopter accident in 2008, another dramatic event. Very few people survive a helicopter accident, as it turns out, statistically. And I'd also been present earlier in America when Father had been sick. But anyway, gradually we started to get news that was unmistakable in its trajectory. And in a way, the tone of our prayers had to change, as it does. When you're faced with something that's going to happen, you have to pray that God will work anyway. You can no longer insist on what you want to happen, and instead you have to think about how can God work through what is going to happen. As it happened, although I was living and working in America, I was here in London when the news finally came through. I was on my way to fly back to New York. And I mention that because True Mother's invited everybody over the last 40 days, and particularly I think in this last few days, to spend some time thinking about the impact that True Parents, and particularly True Father, has had on our lives. And not just to think about it, but to put it in writing and to send it, to contribute it. So for some of you here, maybe too young to even have had such an encounter with true Father, or maybe you've only had one or two, but I want to let you know that every memory, every encounter of true parents is very precious. And I think it's critically important to not let it be lost, which means you have to tell it, you have to share it, and you should write it down. So as it happens, we are collecting an anthology of such reflections and memories of True Father, which we intend to present to True Mother when she comes to Europe in a couple of months to Albania. Now, why is this important? Well, actually, earlier Mitty was giving an account of the story of the woman at the well, also one of my favorites. And if you read the Gospels closely, you'll notice that there's not a lot of theology in there. There are not a lot of sermons in there. There's only two sermons by Jesus, really. The Sermon on the Mount and the Sermon at the Last Supper, which only appears in the Gospel of John. But almost everything else is the story of Jesus' encounter with people, all kinds of people, sinners, saints, Jews, Samaritans, Romans, Pharisees, priests, soldiers, children, prostitutes, everybody. And out of those encounters, we have formed and built our picture of who Jesus really was. Many people prefer that. They feel that in those stories, they understand the heart of God and the heart of Jesus much more substantially than to the two main sermons. After all, who can forget the story of the prodigal son, for example, and recognizing that God is desperate to find his lost children and welcome them home. That's far more compelling than understanding all the laws and commandments that are also important. But in the end, as human beings, we have limited capacity, I believe, at least I do, for religion and religious theories. I need a few simple things that I can hold on to and think, yes, that's who God is and that's who I must be. So in that spirit, as I share with you today about substantial victory, I want to start by thinking about our True Father's life and his course, and in particularly how Father found out about God and approached him in the first place, because that's the beginning, really. One thing we know, Father was not born into a Christian family, so it wasn't as if from a very young age he was brought up with Bible stories and stories about Jesus. There were no Sunday services that he could attend when he was very young, no Sunday school. In fact, his knowledge of God came, at least after he was out of his childhood years, perhaps becoming a teenager. And we're all familiar with the story, as it's told, of True Father's first encounter with Jesus. What's not so well known is how much True Father struggled after that encounter, during, before, and after. His biggest struggle was, not me. Please, God, not me. 2 days ago, Fumiko and I were in St. Petersburg with a group of young people on a harp workshop, and they were all 15 years old. It was that age group. So we lined them up in age order, and then there were 5 who were within a few weeks of the age True Father would be when he first encountered Jesus. So I stood them all up and I asked them, okay, who among you here feels ready to answer the call of God? And there might have been a translation problem because 3 of them said, yes, I'm ready. I was kind of surprised with that. And 2 others said, no, I'm not so sure. So then I asked everybody else, okay, if you were God looking for the person who's going to carry your hopes and dreams, what would you be looking for? What qualifications would you look for in a chosen person? Would you only focus on people who are good looking or who had good education or good health? Would you be looking for something deeper, internal? And of course, everyone agreed. Well, those external things might be important, and certainly they're factors, but the most important, surely, is their internal quality. I said, okay, well, if that's the case, would you choose someone who felt they were ready to answer the call? They had reached a certain maturity in their understanding. Or what if the person you really wanted said, no, I'm not ready? That was different when we had 5 people on the stage, 3 of whom were standing here and said, yes, we're ready. And 2 were standing over here saying, no. And everyone said, oh, no, we choose the people who said they're ready. That's obvious, isn't it? But actually, it's not obvious. Because in fact, that's not what happened with True Father. God insisted and didn't give up when Father said, I'm not ready. I'm not the one. I'm not the person you want. God didn't treat that as a rebellious or faithless response, did he? No, God understood. Yes, in many ways, that's a very understandable response. If you really understand what I'm asking you to do, it's okay to feel a certain doubt and self-reluctance. I accept that. And, thinking about ourselves today, because we're going to go into this a little bit, I'm going to ask you to do something that you probably don't want to do. And it's okay for you to think, please, not me. Somebody else will be fine, but not me. But when we come to that point in the sermon, I want you to remember this kind of anecdote from Father's calling. And it wasn't just once. Actually, in the autobiography, Father goes on to say that for the next 9 years, it was a constant struggle to feel capable and worthy of doing the task that God asked him. He tackled it in every way he could. He studied the Bible intensively. He testified that he would study it in 3 languages simultaneously, English, Korean, Japanese. He'd make so many notes, you could hardly read the text. But so many times he found the answer was not there. And he said that he would go to pray every night in the cold on top of a mountain. But most of the time, he felt his prayer was insufficient, meaningless, not enough. And Father had some very fundamental questions to ask God, the same questions actually that all of us have. And because I'm confident that all of us have, I'm going to ask you, if you were called, what would be the first question? What would be the questions you would ask God as you try to consider this mission of changing and saving the world? I need a volunteer here. Some of you are not looking in a volunteer spirit, but Ruth, I'll ask you first, because you look like you're ready. What would you ask God? What will I have to do? Okay, that's a good question. Yes, in the back. Is that David there?
Do I have to go to an SAS course?
Yeah, do I have special, do I have to be trained in some special way? Or that's a good question. Yes.
Why me?
Why me? Why not somebody else, perhaps? Okay. Jeff, you look like you're ready to say something. Exactly that one? Okay. Probably everyone's got the why me question, right? And I think one thing that really troubled Father the most, and perhaps if we're honest about it, troubles us, is why anybody? Why God as you, the creator of heaven and earth, the creator of the universe? Why don't you fix this mess? You made it. You created the world. You created us. You're all-powerful, almighty, all-knowing. What's going on? At least I've thought that way. I thought if I had those powers, which I do not, just for the record, I would certainly not want to just sit quietly and let things go their own course. I wouldn't. I would do something. But actually, when you become a parent and your children grow up and become adults themselves, which is for many of us the situation, you begin to get an insight into the challenge that faces God. You cannot actually compel your children to do anything. You can advise them, you can encourage them. Sometimes your advice and encouragement gives them exactly the opposite idea, right? You should do this. Okay, I'll do that. Once Father was asked, of all the things that you discovered in the divine principle, all the things you discovered about God, what would you say is the most important point? Okay, time for suggestions from the crowd. Yes. The human portion of responsibility. You're right, actually, but we'll have a few other suggestions. The parent-child relationship. Yes. Same there in the back. I mean, actually, these are connected, of course. But Father's answer was the portion of human responsibility and all that goes along with that. That's the most important thing. It took me 9.5 years to understand this point because I kept tripping up over the same question. Why is God not doing things more quickly? Why are religions fighting? Why are people in conflict? And gradually he realized that the fundamental point is that human beings have responsibility. But why do we have responsibility? That's another question, right? Why did God give human beings responsibility? The answer is another sermon. But fundamentally, it's because we're created in the image of God himself, male and female. God has responsibility. God has free action. God has made us to be exactly in his image, which means that we have responsibility. It's not something that God kind of thought, you know what, I'll make their life difficult and give them responsibility, just as a sort of afterthought. No, it's intrinsic. It's the very essence of who we are. We have choices. Those choices have real consequences, for good or for bad. I've often thought about that dramatic night in the Garden of Eden, when, according to the scriptures, Adam and Eve had just fallen. Put aside for a moment, if you will, the long discussion on what exactly the fall was. Disobedience, a sexual mistake, pride, arrogance. There are many answers. And of course, the divine principle is very clear. But what's come to me is, what did God do afterwards? Right afterwards, God came looking for his children, for Adam and Eve, and asking them, where are you? What is God really asking? Not where are you? God knows. He can see. But he's asking, are you still ready to take your portion of responsibility? Because you can, even now, even today, even after making this dreadful, unforgivable mistake, it can be forgiven. Actually, it can be forgiven quite easily if you will take the responsibility that lies before you right now. And so he asked Adam. And I wasn't there, but as a father myself, I know what God was hoping that Adam would say. He was hoping that Adam would take responsibility and say, Father, we did exactly what you told us not to do. Don't have any excuse. You made it clear. You gave us every warning and opportunity. But if there's any way that we can undo that, if there's any way that I can fix this with your help, please, I'll do anything. What if Adam had responded that way? Instead, of course, he said, no, that woman that you gave me, blaming Eve and God, she's the one. And so God turned his questioning to Eve, his daughter. Think of any father talking to his daughter. Doesn't he want Eve to say, Daddy, I know we've hurt you so badly. We did exactly what you... It was my fault, actually. I was the one who got into this first. I dragged Adam into it, but of course Eve did nothing of the sort. She pointed the finger at Lucifer. And, this kind of broke God's heart again. But I don't think he gave up that first evening. I don't. I think the next day, he must have thought to himself, this has been the worst day of my life. But I'm gonna sleep on it. I'm gonna let them sleep on it. It's been a long day. We'll come back to this tomorrow. And he would ask them again. What if on the second day, Adam had said, okay, thinking about it, I was a real jerk yesterday. I'm doubly a jerk. First of all, I broke your commandment. I violated your trust. And then I tried to push it off and blame others. I was wrong. I can't change what I did, but I can be responsible now. I think if even then Adam and Eve had taken responsibility, God would have opened a way not to have 6,000 years of fallen, suffering history. Don't you think so? Absolutely. But day after day, week after week, even until they had children, they continued not to take responsibility. So that takes us to the time of Cain and Abel. At one time I thought, oh gosh, this is a very strange story. God must really be an idiot. Why would he set up a situation that's guaranteed to make these brothers fight? It's guaranteed, right? If you ask two people to do something and one you say, not acceptable, and the other you say, good job, well done. I don't think you need to be a prophet to realize this is going to cause trouble. And for a long time, this bothered me. I thought, this is a very foolish God here. But later on, a lot later on, I realized actually this is the whole point. God was never interested in offerings anyway for their own sake. He didn't need an animal offering. He didn't need a plant offering or any other kind of offering. What he needed was for Cain and Abel to do what their parents had not done, which is to face the conflict and the challenge inside themselves and take responsibility for it. In that sense, the offerings and all those things were simply to bring that to a head so that they would have to face it while there's still time, while it's still early in human history. What if they had actually embraced each other, as Esau and Jacob later did? I think then they would have been able to talk some sense into their parents. It does happen, right? Sometimes parents, your children, make you see your folly and they show you that your priorities have been wrong. Has any parent had that occasionally? Just one or two? Okay. It does happen. And then what would have happened? In Adam's family, according to the divine principle, God would have found a way to begin again. We don't know exactly what it was. We don't know exactly how it would be. But definitely God's desire was to end that chapter of evil and suffering and start again. That's always been God's plan. It's just taken longer and longer and expanded from one family to many families to a nation. And today, look at the world today. It's not that encouraging, right? There is conflict, there is division, even among the people of faith, including our own church. But God hasn't given up. In fact, he is still asking us to take responsibility. And according to the divine principle, there's two types of responsibility we need to take. We need to make the foundation of faith and the foundation of substance. Now, although this sermon is really about the substantial victory, let us review for a moment this thing called the foundation of faith. What is it? What do we have to do to make a foundation of faith? Again, I'm looking for help here because I didn't study hard enough before this sermon. There are three conditions or three requisites. Yes. Rosemary. Okay, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Yep, that's partially correct, I would say. Definitely somebody needs to do that, right? The answer I was looking for is
Central figure.
the central figure, exactly, David, who is going to love God with all their heart, mind, and strength. There has to be somebody who stands up and takes responsibility to make a foundation of faith. The Bible is full of them. Father was the one who explained that Adam, Noah, and all these figures in the Bible, their stories are preserved because they were central figures. So, central figure, yes? Kieran? Yes, there has to be a conditional offering. And this has changed enormously over time, right? In the beginning, what was the conditional offering? Yeah, it was often things, right? Animals, crops. Later on, it became things representing that, like money. But it can also be time, it can be devotion. There are many ways in which you can show substantially, measurably, that you are making an offering to God. And the last condition? A time period, right? This is very interesting to me, that God does not require this to be forever and ever and ever, which is good news, right? I mean, none of us likes to think, okay, I just have to do this for the rest of my life every day until I die and I'll be okay. Much more encouraging to be told, actually, if you could do this for 40 days or for 3 weeks or for a week or whatever the time period, God will accept it as an entire offering. This is very good news for us. And because of this good news, what we find is the foundation of faith is often successful. It's often successful, and one of the reasons, I think, is it's easy to understand. It's relatively easy to understand. If I want to make a foundation of faith, I have to do it myself. I can't really look to my wife and say, Fumiko, I need to make a foundation of faith. Get on that, will you? Do some prayers and make an offering. A little fasting would be good as well. And let me know when you're done and the time period will be over. No, it doesn't work like that. You have to at least take responsibility and do it yourself. And also, it's pretty obvious that you do need to do something out of the ordinary, something different, whether it's prayer or fasting or study. You have to be able to point at it and say, yes, this is my offering. This is it. This is what I'm bringing before God. And it should, I guess it should hurt a little bit, right? It should cost you something. It can't be, that your offering is so small compared to what you have that it's really takes no faith at all. No, it has to be something that takes real commitment. But, again, mercifully, God doesn't require that to be forever. It has to be for a time period. And at the end whether you've made a foundation of faith or not. Let's say you decide to do a 7-day fast. At the end of 7 days, you can ask your simple question. Has 7 days passed? Yes or no? Yes, it has. Did I eat anything? No, I didn't. Okay, I've done it, It may not be, there may be many internal things, but you have or you haven't. It's pretty clear. So why isn't that enough? And that brings us to the second and far more challenging portion of responsibility, the so-called foundation of substance. Substance is a very unusual word. I prefer to use the foundation of relationship, because this offering can only be fulfilled with somebody else. You cannot do it by yourself. It can only be with another person, or it's not at all. Now when you think about it, that is more difficult, right? First of all, you have to find another person who's even interested in making a foundation with you. And secondly, your success actually will depend on them as well as yourself. Father always used to say, there's no Cain without Abel. There's no Jacob without Esau. There can't be a true parent without true children. Even God, the heavenly parent, can't be the heavenly parent unless he has children. Jesus talked about this. He said, if you are on your way to the temple or to the church to make your offering, and you remember on the way that you have some dispute with your brother, What should you do? Put it out of your mind and go ahead and worship God anyway? No, right? You have to leave your offering and you have to go and reconcile with your brother first. First. But it's the most difficult thing to do, isn't it? So the foundation of substance, I think, is much more difficult. It's even difficult to understand because relationships are hard, aren't they? Relationships are challenging. And if you don't have a good relationship with someone, you cannot fix it by yourself. You know, sometimes you may have an argument with your spouse. You can't demand that the relationship be fixed. It may take a long time, it may take a short time, but it's something that can only be worked on together. That begins to give us an insight even to the struggle that God has to restore his relationship with us. He can't do it by himself. Even if he wanted to, it requires our response. So how do you know if you've made the foundation of substance? Now we're coming to the topic of substantial victory. Foundation of faith, easy. Central figure, time period, offering, check, check, check. I've done it. Foundation of substance, much more difficult. How do you decide if you've made the foundation of substance? How do you know? Somebody else tells you. Cain tells you. Your enemy tells you. Somebody else has to tell you, you've done it. I love you. I accept you as you are. And let's go together to build the kingdom of heaven. Yeah, somebody else has to tell you. So this, of course, is all on the individual level. Let's rack it up a bit now and think of the foundation of substance on the national level, since True Mother's asking us to restore this nation. And Father used to say quite often that we, the members of the Unification Church, the Unification Movement, should stand in the position of Abel on a national level. You heard that sometime, right? And as Abel, of course, we should be making our foundation of faith. I think we are. But that foundation of substance, that unity, I don't think we're doing it. I don't think we have got there yet. If we were, people would be telling us that we did it. People would be coming, asking, please, teach me. Help me. We're not there yet. We're not there even 7 years after Father Sungwa. And I think True Mother herself is very clear-eyed about this. She's very, very practical when it comes to real accomplishment. She's not so impressed, honestly speaking, by big rallies, big numbers. They're important, but she's always looking for something more deep and fundamental, which is, are people coming ready to build the kingdom of God with us, together? There are a few people who are making that jump. You may have seen some of them if you watch True Mother's major events, these mega pastors, these leaders of tens of thousands, even millions of people. They're extraordinary people, actually. But what I notice is that they set aside their own importance. They don't count it anymore. They've come to a point where they realize, we can't do anything ourselves, but we can do it together with each other and with you, True Mother. It's very beautiful to see that these outstanding prophets, ministers, see their relationship as a child of true parents. One of my favorites, I saw him recently in Las Vegas, is Prophet Dr. Samuel Redibe from South Africa. And I met him for the first time about 7 years ago. I think it might even have been at Father Sungwa. And at that time, he was just new in his ministry. And we were sat together at dinner, and I asked him, Prophet Redibe, is that your Christian name? Or is that a title? Or did your parents call you a prophet? I mean, not everyone's called prophet, right? He said, well, actually, to tell you the truth, I never wanted to be a prophet. My father was a prophet, and he had a miserable life. My grandfather was a prophet, and he was persecuted everywhere in our country. So I determined myself, I will not be a prophet. I will make a prophet. And he became a businessman, and a good one. But then he said, not so long ago, God started calling me, telling me, Samuel, just like the Old Testament, I need you now to do what you were born and called to do. You have a gift to bring millions to God. So I was listening to this and I asked him, so okay, a gift to bring millions to God, that sounds good. And you've been doing it about a year, right? How's it going? He said, well, actually God was true to his word. We have about 1 million people. I thought, whoa, I'm in the wrong church here. You know? I'm the president of the Unification Church in America, and we've been working all these years and we only have a few thousands. What's going on? Then I met him again last January in Senegal, and he looked tired. But we greeted each other, and I asked him, oh, so, Samuel, don't call him prophet anymore. How's it going? And if I'm honest with you, a dark little shady part of my mind was thinking, I wonder if he's run into any difficulties. I wonder if he's going to tell me that his congregation has split into two, and one group has gone off into the jungle, and people are fighting about money and inheritance and position. I don't know where I got those thoughts from. I mean, obviously some evil influence. He said, well, yeah, actually, as a matter of fact, it's been really quite a difficult course these last 4 or 5 years, and many times I felt like giving up. But each time I felt that I couldn't go on, I heard God calling me again, Samuel. I said, yeah, so, I mean, how many people you've got now? He said, well, it's about 6 or 7 million. So it's gone from 0 to 1 million to 6 million in 6 years. This is not human work, I'm telling you. This is the work of God. This is the work of the Holy Spirit. This is the merit of the age that the principal always talks about. And this man and others like him want to work with our true mother. This is amazing. And I think it's because our brothers and sisters in Africa made the foundation of substance. They managed to overcome the divisions and the resentment between black and white, between missionaries and members, between brothers and sisters, between all the things that we all face, but somehow they were able to do it. And because they could do it, God could open the floodgates of heaven. Can that happen in Britain? I think it must happen in Britain. It must happen in Europe. We are called to change and transform this nation. There's no second true parents, Mother said last week. It's not going to be another 2,000 years. God will try again. This is it. This is the time that God would like to bring to an end the history that could have been finished in one night, remember. In one night, Adam and Eve could have undone their mistake. Of course, it would have taken a time period for God to work out the solution. It didn't have to take years or thousands of years. So now, this time, when True Mother is here, still, even though Father is in the spirit world, it's time to make the foundation a substance. And if we do, I think the floodgates of heaven will open. So how do we do it? Well, actually it turns out, I think it's really quite simple. The shortcut is to do what Mother's asking us to do. Now, of course, you could say, well, I'm not so sure. If Father were here and he asked me to do it, I might do it. But Father's not here anymore. But I believe he's living and working through True Mother all the time. And she's asked us to do some very simple things. And the most fundamental one is to go out, to testify, like the woman at the well, to tell people that true parents are here. Now, of course, there's many ways to do that. But we have a special opportunity which is the centenary of True Father's birth next year, very soon now, which is also what would have been True Parents' diamond wedding. Mother herself is very practical. She knows You know, we have been trying to testify to true parents for 60 years, right? I think everyone in this room has been trying. And I think we'd also admit it's not working exactly how we would like it to do. But the 100th year, the centenary, that really is a special opportunity because, for among other things, it's reasonable when celebrating a centenary to go all out. I was in South Africa last November. It was the centenary of Nelson Mandela. His picture was everywhere. There were exhibitions. AJ and I attended. We went to Robben Island. We went to the Mandela Museum. A few years before that, it was the 100th anniversary of JFK. And all over America, even people who didn't like him were reflecting what would have happened if John F. Kennedy had not been assassinated. So the 100th year, it's a great chance to look again at what true parents gave us and shared with us. However, that is, I think, unique to every nation. I don't think we can just appropriate the way they're going to do it in Korea or Japan and do the same thing here in London. What do you think? I don't think so. They have a different culture there, and I don't think it will fly here in Britain. In fact, I think we need to draw on our entire cultural and spiritual heritage and think, how can we really show true father and mother in a way that British people can understand and feel, yes, we need to look at this again. We need to understand what they taught, what they lived. I can't ask the French to do that for you, or the Germans, or the Russians. I don't know how many of you watch our weekly video. Can I see a show of hands? If you saw this week's weekly video, you'll have seen lots of exciting things from Russia. That's where Fumiko and I spent our last couple of weeks. But I can't ask the Russians to do this job. They could do it for Russia. You know, they have to think, how will we tell the story of true parents in a Russian context? But only the British movement can do it for Britain. And we can't do it alone. Actually, we need to go out. We need to ask people of other faiths, other communities. We need to have a completely fresh mindset. We're not interested in just telling the same story again. If we do, we will fail. We have to think, how does God want to let this nation fulfill its destiny and understand, at least in this moment, who true parents are, what they came to do. Actually, this is what Mother is asking us, begging us to do. And she said, don't worry about the results. And I think this is my final point. It's not your responsibility how people respond. But if we don't ask, they don't have a chance. Going back to Samuel Redibe, how did he meet the movement? How did he make the first step towards true parents? Well, he had a dream. He had a dream, and in his dream he heard, you must find the woman from Asia who is blessing marriages. That's it. No face, no name. But the next day, 2 Japanese missionaries came to his church. He thought they were the women from Asia giving blessings. They were the representative. They did not speak English. They had not been to UTS. They held no theological degrees. They were tired and fed up because they'd been to many churches and spoken to many ministers who had either rejected them or simply killed them with polite kindness and sent them on their way. It was their last stop of the day. But because they made it, the connection that brought such great fruit could be fulfilled. So I told you I'm going to ask you to do something that you don't want to do. I know you don't want to do it because you're not doing it. Let's be honest. I'm not any different myself. But we have to think, who can we tell? How can we tell them? Let it not be that this year expires and we come to 2020 and I didn't tell people. I didn't use my creativity to do it. And honestly speaking, you can't do it by yourself either. You need a team. You need people who will hold you accountable and help you when the going gets difficult. But I think we can do it. I think we can do it. And if we do, allow yourself for a moment to think what it would be like if we really can fulfill the national foundation of substance. If all the preparation that God made for Christendom, for the great universities, the churches, the movements for religious freedom, the able-type movements like ending slavery, and so many others that God used this country. All the ancestors, all those who gave their lives in sacrifice and wars and conflicts, confused though they may have been, they are waiting. They are watching. True Mother feels that Europe must fulfill its destiny because it is Jesus' mission. It was to Europe that Jesus sent his missionaries and disciples. It was in Europe that God wanted to send the Messiah, originally, right? Providence moved on, and the second coming didn't take place in Europe. However, God will never forget all of that foundation. If it is not consummated, it's as if Jesus lived for nothing. True Mother cannot allow that to happen, which is why she's really, really serious. Okay, let me give you some very simple homework, the easy homework. As I mentioned, True Mother's very interested to know how have true parents affected your life. Their teaching, a personal encounter, it could be a dream. Actually, if you go back to the Bible, you'll realize almost nothing is out of bounds, right? There are dreams in the Bible that changed history. There are encounters with people who made big mistakes, who upset Jesus, but nevertheless their stories are there. Why? Because somebody wrote them down. Somebody thought, I will share this, even if it makes me look not so great. That's okay too. So you have 5 days left before True Father's Ascension anniversary. I would like to ask you, invite you, take some time to think about the impact true parents have had on your life, especially True Father. Put it in writing. 3-4 paragraphs is quite enough. It can be short. You can write your autobiography later, and I hope you will. But for this moment, we're looking to encourage True Mother with memories of the impact that she and True Father made. Don't think that True Mother doesn't need to hear that because she's in this special relationship with God. She doesn't need to know that what she's saying and doing is having an impact in people's lives. No, we all need that. We all need to know that what we're doing has meaning, has value, and the only way, frankly, is to have give and take action. You can email that. You can email it to your pastor. What will happen, we'll collect them, they'll be translated. And every morning, without fail, after breakfast, True Mother asks, are there any testimonies or reports from around the world? And she will hear them. She can't read them herself anymore because of her eyesight. So somebody will read them. And of course, there's a lot of testimonies, but I'm very proud to tell you that almost 2/3 of them come from Europe. From the whole world, 2/3 of the testimonies come from Europe because we are getting good. We're getting good at putting these things in writing and sharing them. And I want to encourage you, the Central London and North London communities, because what if, a week from now, 10 days from Mother now, and Mother said, are there any testimonies? I said, well, as a matter of fact, it's rather unusual. We have 100 testimonies from London. Mother will think, London, huh? I was there with True Father in 2011. What are they saying? Maybe that night when Mother goes to bed, she'll say a special prayer for London. And then you'll write another testimony, and before long, Mother will be thinking, you know what, I should go to Britain again. I need to go there. I'd like to see. This is how it happens, right? We have to make the foundation of substance so the Messiah can come. It's our decision whether True Mother will ever come to London again, but we need her here. We need her to come and share her message. Anyway, I think I've said enough for now. Please use these next 5 days very well. Please don't be shy. Don't think about it too much either. Give yourself an hour, sit down, and do it. You'll feel much better afterwards, and it will be a real substantial offering that we can make to our true parents in this very special and important week. In a way, it's our Easter week. Have you thought of it that way? This is our Easter week. And people are thinking that seriously about the life of our true parents. I want to invite Fumiko to come here now and ask her if she'll help me say a closing prayer.
Good morning, brothers and sisters. I know the true parents touched each one of you in the heart. But when you write testimony, please don't write. Please, Mike Balcomb asked me to write testimony, but it's just naturally just come from your heart.
Okay, let's pray.
Okay, please join me in prayer. Our loving Heavenly Parents, we are truly grateful to be here and worship you. We are really grateful your love, and you sent our true parents here on the earth as a true mother, telling us so many times that how lucky people we are to know our true father who is in the spirit world now, and a true mother who are tirelessly working as in a very front line with dignity, with passion, with such a focus and such a dedicated mind, devotion. We are truly grateful for true mother's incredible determination to do your will, to bring your world back to this earth. We want to see this whole world is your dwelling place. We are living in a time of such a chaotic society and world. But as the true mother said, that if we work together with mother, with united spirit, even though with each one of us a small ability, but we know that when we unite with true parents, we can do incredible work. Heavenly Parents, we truly thank you so much for this morning. You gave us a beautiful sunny day, and your beloved sons and daughters here to be together with you, with true parents. Heavenly Parents, we want to ask your guide for the coming week, and especially to really reflect our life, how our true father and true mother gave an impact in our life. Heavenly Father, please guide our day, decide, report together with all your children here, and Mike and Hemiko Balcomb, bless Central family, as you.
Adieu.